A contractor walks into a parts counter with a cracked windshield quote in his hand. He drives a late-model truck. The glass itself is not the shock. The shock is the second line on the estimate. Camera calibration. Sensor relearn. Scan procedure. Suddenly, one rock chip and one pane of glass are no longer a simple repair. They are an event. A bill that starts in the hundreds and can push far beyond what a windshield used to cost. And that is when the real fear hits. Because the problem is not just that modern truck repairs are expensive. The problem is that the expensive part is no longer always the truck itself. It is the electronic layer wrapped around the truck. The cameras, the radars, the modules, the wiring, the software handshake between one part and another. That is the split smart owners are starting to notice. The guys driving certain older Silverados, Sierras, Rams, Tacomas, and work-trim F-150s are not fighting the same war. They replace glass. They replace mirrors. They fix what broke. Then, they go back to work. No calibration targets. No dealer-only authorization ritual. No electronic ceremony standing between a repaired truck and a running truck. That difference is not random. It sits on the other side of a line most buyers do not even know exists. It is not just an age line. It is a system line. And that is what this video is about. The pre-system loophole. The period, the platforms, and the cutoffs where trucks were built before the full sensor stack took over ordinary ownership. Because once you see where that line is, you start to realize something uncomfortable. The most expensive thing on many modern trucks is no longer the engine. It is permission. And some trucks were built before permission became part of the repair bill. To understand why that matters, you have to stop thinking of modern truck technology as a list of features and start seeing it for what it really is: a layered control architecture. At the bottom is detection, cameras behind the windshield, radar units buried in bumpers, blind spot hardware in mirrors and rear corners, pressure sensors, emissions sensors, position sensors, temperature sensors. Everything is measuring something. Above that is interpretation. Control modules take all that data and decide what it means. A camera slightly out of position, a sensor reading outside tolerance, a communication fault on a data line. The truck starts logging, flagging, escalating. Then comes the punishment layer. Warning lights, reduced functionality, calibration requirements, disabled features. In some cases, on certain diesel platforms, countdown logic and limp mode that can restrict what the truck allows you to do next. And above all of it is the control layer. This is where ownership starts slipping out of your hands. Proprietary software, pairing requirements, dealer tooling, components that physically fit but still need digital approval before they fully work. The part is installed, but the system still gets the final vote. That is the trap. Not one part, not one brand, not one failure, a stack. And once that stack gets dense enough, the truck stops being something you simply repair. It becomes something you negotiate with. That is why the phrase pre-system matters. It does not mean problem-free. It means built before certain layers became unavoidable. The biggest mistake people make is thinking this is about finding one magical truck. It is not. It is about understanding the cutoff points that changed ownership. One of the biggest was 1996. That is when OBD became mandatory on gasoline vehicles. Before that, diagnosis on many trucks stayed much closer to the machine itself. After that, the truck began living inside a standardized fault reporting architecture. It could now monitor, report, and increasingly shape the repair path. Then, the layers kept stacking. On the diesel side, the shift became far more aggressive. Around 2007, emission systems became far more intrusive. Then around 2010, diesel trucks entered the DEF and SCOR era. That meant pumps, injectors, fluid quality concerns, NOx sensors, temperature sensors, pressure sensors, and the logic to enforce compliance through the truck's operation itself. That was the moment a diesel problem could stop being a mechanical problem and become an authority problem. The engine may still be capable of moving, the truck may still have fuel, compression, and drivetrain, but the system now has veto power. And this is exactly why experienced owners keep gravitating toward older platforms that sit before the full stack locked in. They are not always buying old trucks because they are nostalgic. They are buying distance from the system. Look at the behavior in the market. Certain trucks do not just hold value. They attract loyalty that looks irrational until you understand what buyers are actually paying for. Early 2000s diesel platforms, pre-DEF generations, older gas trucks without dense ADAS packaging, work trims with fewer integrated electronics, simpler mirrors, simpler glass, simpler bumpers, simpler failure boundaries. That is the keyword, boundaries. A pre-system truck can absolutely fail. Injectors fail, seals leak, wiring ages, rust wins battles, transmissions still break. These trucks are not immune to wear. What they are often protected from is a certain kind of cascading, permission-based failure. A bad part stays a bad part. A local issue stays local. A repair usually ends when the broken thing is replaced or fixed. It does not automatically spill outward into calibration routines, software pairing, sensor geometry, compliance logic, or a network of modules deciding whether the truck agrees with your repair. And that invoice is only half the story. The other half is downtime, lost work, insurance complications, appointment delays, dealer bottlenecks, back-ordered electronics, a truck that you are still paying for, while it sits because some small digital dependency has turned into a major real-world interruption. This is why the safest move is usually not to fight the system after you buy it. It is to avoid buying deeper into it than you need to. Once you are inside a highly integrated modern platform, removing or bypassing things is rarely clean. Systems talk to each other. One missing function triggers another response. One modification can create legal issues, inspection issues, drivability issues, or reliability issues, depending on the platform and where you live. The stable play is selection. You choose the architecture before you choose the badge. You pay attention to model years, engine generations, emissions stages, ADAS density, trim level, whether the truck lives before or after certain layers became mandatory. That is what the pre-system loophole really is. Not a trick, not a hack, not a delete strategy, a selection strategy. A way of choosing trucks built before ownership became so conditional, and once you understand that, the market starts making sense. The trucks marketed as old are often not simply old. They are the last machines from an era where ownership still felt direct. Trucks, where the machine answered more often to fuel, air, compression, hydraulics, cables, gears, and mechanical tolerance than to cameras, modules, subscriptions, digital approvals, and sensor confidence levels. That is why some owners will rebuild them instead of replacing them. That is why some mechanics would rather live with an old mechanical annoyance than a new electronic hostage situation. That is why a rough but structurally sound older truck can feel less risky to the right buyer than a newer truck loaded with systems they cannot fully control. Because the risk profile changed. Older trucks often come with more visible, physical, understandable maintenance. Modern trucks often come with fewer but more expensive, more entangled, more restrictive failures. That is the real comparison. Not old versus new. Not comfort versus simplicity. Not nostalgia versus progress. Contained risk versus cascading dependency. That is the buying decision hiding under all of this. What kind of failure can you live with? A mechanical problem you can isolate, understand, and fix? Or a system problem that can spread outward, invoice upward, and sometimes decide whether you are allowed to keep using what you already own? That is the question smart owners are answering when they move backward on purpose. And this is where the title pays off completely. How do some trucks dodge expensive sensors? Not because they are magical, not because they are perfect, because they were built before the dense camera radar module calibration era became permanent, before every small repair started dragging digital dependencies behind it, Before the truck became surrounded by electronic checkpoints that all have the authority to complicate ownership. That is the pre-system loophole. That pool is not infinite, it is shrinking. More people are catching on. Clean, simpler trucks are not getting easier to find. And every year that passes, more buyers figure out that what they thought was old was actually the last version of truck ownership that still made instinctive sense. So if you are looking at trucks right now, stop asking only what is newer. Stop asking only what is nicer. Stop asking only what has more features. Ask a harder question. How much system are you buying along with the truck? Because once you see that clearly, the market splits in two. Trucks that you maintain, and trucks that maintain compliance with themselves. That is the real line. That is the real loophole. And that is why some of the smartest truck owners in the country are moving backward on purpose. Not to escape progress, to escape dependency. If your truck still lives on the direct side of that line, hold on to it. And if you are shopping right now, pay very close attention to when that platform was built, what systems are packaged into ordinary repair items, and how much authority those systems have once something small goes wrong. Because the difference between a truck that drains you and a truck that serves you is no longer just brand or price. It is architecture. It is cutoff dates. It is how much of the system gets a vote. And in a market full of trucks that increasingly want permission to keep being trucks, the pre-system machines are the last ones that still understand a simpler contract. You buy it, you fix it, you use it. No negotiation.